And good evening, everybody. It is Monday, which means obviously it is time for our MMOBuff podcast, which tends to talk about absolutely everything involving gaming, especially in the online universe. You may see some faces you recognize, and you may see some faces you don't. There is a reason for this. We've decided that today we're going to not just bring to you typical faces you're used to, but we're going to introduce you to some of the people who are working behind the scenes at MMOBuff and let you have an idea of how their brains function or don't function. Totally your choice to make a decision on that. So, before we go too far, let me introduce you to everybody. As you know, I am just Pseudo, Crazy Lopzilla Mutezilla, although I didn't mute myself today. Congratulations to myself. And I've got next to me the glorious Gazimoff, who everyone should remember and know and adore, and I really need to turn Skype off because I totally forgot to. But go ahead. Say hi, Gazi.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. It's been a long day, you know? Crumple up like a...
Like a chewer? Like a chewer, maybe?
Yeah, like a chewer.
Yeah. And then curl up and go to sleep. And below me, you guys may recognize the face. You even may recognize the name. This is somebody who has been on one of our shows before, particularly where we were talking about DPS when we were discussing the Holy Trinity. It is Occi. And for those of you who are unaware, Occi is one of our editors. He goes through and basically spell checks and grammar checks most things that hit the website. Any other mistakes after that are my own. Because I'm the one who puts them on after he edits them. But go ahead, say hello, Occi.
Hello, everybody.
And we are joined by a face and a name that some may know, some may not recognize, but I'll give him a chance to truly introduce himself in a second. But in the corner down there, you see Alris. Now, Alris is my minion.
Is that what we're calling it now?
It's pretty much, I'm like, I need help. And he's like, I shall help you. But do you want to tell people a little bit about your gaming history, since we've learned a little bit from Occi in his DPS episode?
Okay, gaming history. Mostly, I played just about everything, but I played a lot of World of Warcraft back in the day, and as Pseudo kind of hinted at, I used to do a Theorycraft-based podcast back in the World of Warcraft radio days with Total Biscuit, and before he became big. So little claim to fame, but
you've got your own. You did the Theorycrafting. I still remember listening to that. Just saying, all those good things.
That was a long time ago.
Yes, but now we're all here. We're all basically working hard to bring you guys some amazing stuff. And in fact, you guys are really going to want to pay attention to all of the social media stuff, because we do have something rather amazing coming. So, now that you've gotten a chance to basically say hello and introduce yourselves to everyone, tonight's episode is all about MMOs from dawn to dusk. Now, this was inspired, in fact, by a topic that Gazi said last week. You know, maybe you might want to look at the sunset of MMOs. Someone's phone is going off. But he says maybe you should look at the sunset.
That's the doorbell I was talking about.
Oh, that's the door. Looks like Alris has got pizza. But yes, he said we should look at the sunsets of MMOs. And that was a brilliant idea. And we're like, yeah, we'll put it into the little corner for us when we go to start pulling topics, because we have so many topics we want to discuss. And then news hit. For those of you who are World of Darkness fans and of CCP fans, you have probably seen, heard, or been made aware of the fact that CCP has stopped producing World of Darkness MMO. Now, this has an interesting concept. I mean, the actual press release did say on their website that they have stopped producing it. They may come back to it, they may not. They just said that it wasn't up to scratch, really, is the way they described it. This has affected 56 jobs in Georgia, which is kind of sad, because we never want to see game developers kind of lose their jobs in a market and today. Just kind of nasty. But I have to bring this lovely quote to you from our wonderful Occi, who points out, despite the death of the World of Darkness MMO failing to be embraced by its fan base due to a botched siring attempt, there are still immortal fans of VTM Bloodlines and modders keeping the game playable despite its elder game status. And that is so true, especially if you are a World of Darkness fan, like I am. like really badly. But
I was
yes.
so excited when they first declared from White Wolf, we're coming out with a World of Darkness MMO. And enthusiasm began to depreciate as they're like, it's going to be purely social, and we're not going to be the ones only working on this. We're going to pass this on over to CCP, which already has its own MMO going, namely Eve.
Well,
Eve.
that's because CCP own White Wolf. I did buy them out quite some time ago.
Yeah, they did. And it's interesting because of all the game development companies out there, and Gazzy, you're going to have to tell me if you agree because you're quite aware of as many as I am, there really wasn't another MMO company I thought that could do it justice because of its sandbox nature.
Well, I've got to be honest with you, I'm one of the few people that's actually seen World of Darkness in action. And that was at Eve FanFest last year.
Wait. You've seen it in action?
Yeah, I actually saw the game running. Well, I say technically saw the game running. It was video footage, gameplay video footage from the game, and we got a feel for the dev process that they were putting into it, and both the producers and the art team talked a lot about what they were trying to do and trying to achieve. But the problem that you have is that a lot of what they discussed was on a technical basis in terms of we're looking at having this kind of organic city structure and being able to throw a city together quite easily, but making it very intricately detailed and getting that feel of the universe going. And there was very little talk about rule sets, mechanics, and all those kind of bits and pieces. And I ultimately think that's probably where it fell short. Now, the big kind of question for me about this is that I think for CCP, it kind of needed to go back to its roots a bit. When they developed EVE Online, they started off over 10 years ago now and kind of fumbled a bit before they found their feet, and it's been growing pretty much non-stop ever since. I think with World of Darkness, they tried to get it right first time, and when it wasn't feeling right, now I'm hopefully going to find out some more about why they decided to do this in EVE FanFest later on this month. But I think that when they tried to do it this time around, they tried to have it right first time, and instead of putting stuff out there and getting people to try it and then see how it works and stuff like that, they felt, no, this isn't working, it's not living up to fan expectations, it looks gorgeous, but it's not playing right, it doesn't have the right level of immersiveness and depth. Now, I'm just guessing here, but that's kind of where I think the decision was made. And so they probably said, well, we will cut it for now and possibly come back to it in the future. And I think that's the difficulty, because when you're trying to design sandbox MMOs, there are very few experimental rule sets out there that you can lever on. In fact, EVE itself are pioneers in this area. So I think that in that respect, it's a difficult one.
Well, see, that's the thing. When it comes to developing a game off of an IP that's already been created, especially if it's not like a digital game, and be careful, Alris, we can hear you clicky-clacking, just so that
Problems
you know.
with mechanical keyboards.
Yeah. Be very gentle with your typing. Use Q-tips. Could you? But when you start dealing with an IP that is not digital in its original format, it makes it incredibly complicated. And especially the way that White Wolf, at least in my opinion, did their iterations of the different, I would almost want to call them episodes, but they're not. They're editions of their games and their rule sets. I mean, how would you pull across doing a check for a lie? How would you, in a social game, do that without having an immense amount of either sort of AI capability or... You know, I mean, there's just so many things built into being able to do a tabletop that you can do when you're facing people, and, you know, it's a whole different thing than trying to bring a social aspect into it. Now, the reason why I thought EVE, or the CCP could be incredibly successful was because of EVE. Because EVE's entire purpose is run amok, make your corporations, backstab people if you want. That's part of the game. Infiltrate, help build some giant stuff. I mean, that's kind of the way it works. And it would have been really interesting to see just how all of the different abilities and things in that particular IP could have been brought into play just simply letting people be themselves or whatever they've created
True.
character-wise.
But you've got a basic problem with EVE Online. Your ability to infiltrate is based on your real-world subterfuge skills. In World of Darkness, it's a numerical check.
This is true.
And that's the difficult thing, that how do you create something that feels World of Darkness in terms of providing you with that flexibility while leveraging the skills that should be rule set based and should be mechanics based in a computer system, and those skills that should be based on your ability to play. And it's a difficulty that every single MMO goes through. I mean, take the battle in theme park MMOs between hotkey-based tab targeting and action MMOs, and the old guys saying, we can't keep up with this fancy tab action MMO stuff. We want to go tab targeting and hotkeys, and that's what we want because we can't keep up. And the same thing is happening with sandboxes, except you've got chalk on the one side and nothing on the other.
I'm just, wow. It's so good to see you so relaxed there, Cassie. Not to say that there really is a big difference between, say, an old player and a new player. I mean, I've been playing MMOs since MMOs were MMOs, and I can keep up. But, I can kind of see where you're coming from.
So when I say old player, I mean a veteran player who has become stuck in his ways. There are some of us who embrace the change and relish it as a challenge because it's something new, interesting, and appealing as a result. And there are some of us who've become comfortable and want to relax in a warm armchair and maybe just put a different throw over it all the time. And for those people, well, you know what you like, and that's good for you, but I prefer to progress.
Well, you know how he feels. I was just about to say, I've got a question for you, Occi, and this comes from our chat. Considering the fact that we're talking about how taking, say, a tabletop IP and bringing it into a digital environment, Drosteblood says they've tried to convert D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, into a game, and it hasn't worked out quite right yet. Now, I know that you do both. You've played the online game. You're also a D&D player for tabletops. Do you feel they've made a successful transition?
To address that point, successful transition. They made a game. It was playable. I enjoyed parts of it, not all of it. I thought when it was released, the concept of, like every D&D trope, you go to the tavern and you must find other players and you must go to a dungeon, and that was the only way to gain experience when it first came out, when I was in near beta testing or on release. I didn't particularly like that because I enjoy being able to solo in a game. I enjoy a character that can do something without necessitating a group. But to the heart of D&D, very few D&D campaigns were a single-person story. It was almost always a group's adventure towards some objective, and often it involved a dungeon, or, if not a dungeon, a dragon, as the name implies. I mean, you're questing across the landscape to go raid the cavern of the great... not Smog. And you are possibly beset by orcs that aren't orcs. I mean, whatever the variations the DM wants to throw in there. But the mechanics of D&D, from playing it on tabletop, were pretty simple, because pencil and paper, plus a die roll, there were some pluses and minuses. Once you knew the game, the very basics, very simple. But all of the loopholes to an advanced or veteran player is where the nuance to the game really made the game unique. So, as Drosteblood mentions, Temple of Evil, I didn't particularly like that game. I played it a bit. I didn't like because it was so short. Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment, those are better.
I can already see a debate brewing here, but what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is get into debate as to what necessarily is a better game versus a different game.
But specifically to MMO, like, they've tried it multiple times with D&D Online and Neverwinter. I agree. I don't think I've seen them crack the code yet.
Okay. Now, before we started the show, I was in a little bit of a discussion with Alris, and I'm going to tap his brains on this, and then Gazzy, I really want to get your thoughts on this as well. When it comes to talking about games ending or stopping development, when we talk about sunset, what we're really talking about with the game is the developers say, we are no longer going to be updating it. We're no longer patching it. We're no longer creating content for it. None of our development cycle resources are going to be devoted to this. So, for example, we have EverQuest 1, which is still running, still getting updates, not as fast as, say, EverQuest 2, but it is still active. So, EverQuest 1 is not in sunset. There are other games that have gone, like Tabula Rasa is one of the ones we mentioned.
I've got to say, EverQuest 1 still not being in sunset after all these years it's kind of mind-blowing, because it's how old now?
I don't know. Did you ever play EQ1, Gazzy?
I have played EverQuest 1. Now, I have a couple of takes on this. I think... Now, I have a little bit of a kind of grudge against the whole EverQuest lore, because EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2, and EverQuest Next will have the same NPCs and the same kind of characters involved in their storylines, but 3 different storylines to get your heads around with 3 different kind of parallel universes. It's like, please, can you just make up your mind and stick to it for once? But
it's like comic books, you know?
It's like comic books, and... I'll just put that one to one side for now. So here's my take. Games like Tabula Rasa, to be honest with you, and Hellgate London, they did need to be taken around the back and shot and put out there. There are no two ways about it.
Oh, okay. Now,
Hellgate London had its own set of problems, but Tabula Rasa's main one was Richard Garriott.
Well, that's his name. Now, the issue that I have with... I think bad games should... Now, there is a kind of flip side to bad games that can become better, and that's flipping free to play. And there are some games which are not quite as bad as Tabula Rasa, but have gone free to play. And I'm looking at things like Terra here, and possibly Ion, although...
It's quite hard to be as bad as Tabula Rasa.
Well, this is true. But you kind of get the idea. So the kind of mediocre ones who kind of flip into free-to-play mode and then continue. But I'm kind of worried because there's games like that, and there's games like Horizon's Empire of Istaria, or now Istaria Realm of the Gifted, and that's the first MMO I ever played. And that got converted not to free-to-play, but it kind of got handed around from the main publisher, who was Atari at the time, to another publisher, and then to a third publisher, and then the fans bought the game and they're continuing to keep it going as a labour of love. And it's kind of got this undead zombie MMO life that keeps going. It's like you occasionally hear it growling, dragon there, and you think, why? Just please, either make something new or turn it off. The 50 people that you have still playing the game might love you to death for it, but at some point you need to let developers explore their creative freedom and their artistic ability in other ways, rather than continuing to keep the life support machine going on this outdated and quite frankly stale MMO.
Okay, how do you make a decision on that, though?
Well, it comes down to...
What is the characteristics of a game that should be taken out back and brought to Old Yeller? I mean, what exactly are the quote-unquote metrics you should be using here? If it's not those 50 people who are paying enough money to keep the developers in a job, so thus they're still there, I mean, what metrics need to be looked at there?
So I think there's 2 things that you need to look at. If you have, as a studio, released a clanger, then, and it's taken you a lot of time to develop, you need to do a quite speedy cost-benefit analysis to say, okay, the amount of people that we've got playing this game and the amount of people who are going to continue playing it, and that was probably sinking at a fairly sharp rate for Hellgate London. You've got 2 options, really. You can say, okay, we can either kill it now while we're still in kind of pseudo profitability, or we can keep it running for 3-4 months And I think, what was it?
3 or
Tabula
4
Rasa even
months.
managed to. Well, I think Tabula Rasa managed to beat Hellgate London. I think it was 84 days they kept that running before they finally pulled the plug.
Okay,
And I think
Pinky points out when there's less than 100 people playing on a daily basis, put that stuff down.
exactly. So
Well,
there is-
the biggest example of this is, of course, Warhammer Online.
yeah. Well, I don't
And-
think
Mm.
The
Warhammer
sheer-
did last a fair amount of time. To be fair
Yes.
with it,
But
and
some
it
of that
stopped-
was also some of that was also continued attempts at kind of reinvigorating it, like that 3v3 MOBA thing they sort of tried to do, and to sort of keep the name out
Yeah.
there and alive.
The joke was that the 3v3 MOBA was actually the Warhammer, the kind of thing they did was actually reasonably good fun. It just didn't have a lot of depth of skill to it, like League of Legends. So it became, once you started getting all the abilities and you kind of got the ideal build, you were kind of set and you didn't need to push your skill level any further. And that was the kind of thing that, if you look at MMOs or MOBAs rather, like League of Legends and things like Dota 2, they have quite a high skill cap. And Wrath of Ancients, I think, or Wrath of Guardian, or Wrath of Heroes, or Wrath of something, Wrath of Cake. Warhammer Wrath of Cake just did not have that kind of high skill cap. So, which is why it failed.
Maybe if it had a name
However-
like that and it was all about the cake, they
Yeah.
would be successful. But then again, everyone knows the cake is a lie. So
True. So
But yes,
there
but it
is
was very much a case of they dragged that one out a lot longer than perhaps they should have, and it should have been put down a lot sooner.
So there is another option, and that
Ooh.
is, instead of saying, okay, we're going to switch to free-to-play and try and recover, which is what SWTOR has done reasonably successfully. It's now managed to get a fairly loyal fan base, and there are people who are spending quite a bit of money in the in-game store. You can, and so that's one option. You can kill it with extreme prejudice. That's the second option. There is a third option, and this is the third option. Instead of killing the game outright or switching it to free-to-play, you do what Square Enix did with Final Fantasy XIV. You turn it to free-to-play temporarily, and you completely rebuild the game from the ground up to make it more interesting, more engaging, and have a much more appealing rule set. And then you re-release it some 2 years later. And that's actually worked really well. It's particularly worked because they've managed to tie into the release of the PlayStation 4, particularly in Japan. But it's also meant that it's had a second bite of the apple. And that's something that's very, very rare. But kudos to them. They've actually produced a really decent product this time around.
Well, they did.
Well.
It is kind of built on one of the longest running IPs with some of the most amount of game production towards one IP. I mean, Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It just goes on.
Well,
so it's had a bit of sustainability to
Well,
it.
you can say one IP, but technically, if you really want to look at it, every Final Fantasy is its own individual IP as well, with some shared elements.
Yeah, I can get behind that, but they all carry the same banner. It's sort of like it's not, they're not expansions, so to speak, for the game. It is a completely different story, but they set the precedence for having a franchise where the story changes, but they have something in common
Elements.
all across the board. Now we've had Pinky
There's
say
always the
that
black
free
magic,
to
the white
play.
magic, the chocobos.
Yeah, exactly. And the Chocobo music, and you've always got the tragic hero, and there's always something big and bad that you can usually summon to do something with. I mean, there's all kinds of things in there that match. But Pinky0126 says free to play is not the answer ever because of trolls.
Ooh, I disagree.
Disagree.
I like how this is going. Sorry, Pinky, it looks like you've got some disagreement here on the panel. Hit us up, and I'm going to let Alris go first because we've got those three awesome things from you, Gazzy.
Some games are made better when they go free to play. I give you DDO. That was a game that, frankly, when it was released, was bad. It was not great. But actually, when they moved it over to free to play, they did it probably one of the better ways I've seen an MMO go free to play, and yeah, actually, it was quite a fun game for all of its limitations. I'm still a fan of that game, even if I've not played it anywhere near as much as perhaps I'd have liked to.
And whereas I, having played DTO and the iteration of free-to-play and as well as purchase, I am not a big fan of DTO at all. I'm not.
It's a very odd game, and you've got to...
You have to take it for what it is.
Yeah, it's like combination of dice rolls and action that's not one or the other.
Yeah, I still love the fact that you could actually turn on the die, so you could see every hit its rolls.
You can see the
for
rolls.
all of the
you can
dice.
See the rolls.
And I was just like, so yay.
Yeah. The combat system was a little odd, shall we say, and leave it there. But in terms of the concept and what they were trying to do, and the model they used for the free-to-play, where you kind of can sort of buy the quests bit by bit, almost like an adventure pack, as you would for the actual pen and paper. I thought that was a nice idea, and you could always subscribe, pay your £10 a month and get the whole game as you like, or just buy the little bits you want as you go. If you don't like that quest chain, you don't buy it.
Well, see, that's kind of how some free-to-play games work. Not all of them do. I mean, for example, we've also had the Ninjaneer. Hi. It's been a while since I've seen you, but hi. He says that DCUO has become better since they've got a new dev team after going free-to-play because they could probably afford it, which is interesting. Now, this comment comes from Zenfar, and this just kind of made me take a moment and go, They say it seems to be tough to make enough money with a free-to-play model without making your customers feel like marks who are being mugged via the internet. Now, since we're taking things out into the back and shooting them, we might as well delve a little bit into how Sunset can be the Sunset can be affected by doing this migration, and we're kind of doing it already. But most people would say that game developers should stick to free-to-play models, just because people can play when they want to play and pay what they want to pay.
Ooh. Okay, I have some kind of opinions on this one. I've seen two ends of the free-to-play model. I've seen the first incarnation of SWTOR's free-to-play model, which was highly aggressive, and that's putting it in as polite a way as possible.
I was going to say that's a very polite way of putting it.
That has got to be one of the most politically minded statements I think I've ever heard from you, Gazi. Because I would call it
is an understatement.
Is what I would call it. But yes.
So,
I'd call it less aggressive and more just outright predatory. It was pretty bad.
So I think that the SWTOR initial free-to-play mechanism was pretty poorly thought out, and since it's continued, it's become much more reasonable over time. And I think it's quite nice because you've got now people who play 3 or 4 different MMOs, and they dive into SWTOR, and when they feel like having a bit of fun in SWTOR, they might buy something off the item store. I think that the fact that if you've bought something off the item store once, you then get a load of unlocks is quite nice. But I think the fact that if you want to continue having access to everything, you've got to be a subscriber, I think that's a little bit rich. I prefer, if I'm honest with you, the Guild Wars 2 method of you pay for the box and then the game itself is free. And there's 2 fundamental reasons for that. If you have a barrier to entry, which involves handing over cash, you tend not to get the raging trolls rampaging through your community. Because if they have to fork over real cash to get into the game, and if they behave like idiots, they lose access to the game and have to pay for it again, then they're less likely to behave like idiots. At least that's the general theory. There is a third alternative, which is the League of Legends method, which is much more subtle and much more clever, which basically says you can play the whole game for free, and it's reasonably straightforward and has very finely tuned mechanics. But you can... there are 3 elements that you can use to customize your various champions. Some of those you might spend money to unlock champions, you might spend money to get various bits and pieces. And I think and there's been some really interesting studies on it, and the way they have that set up, the balance between the currency you accrue by playing and winning, and the currency you spend in store is very smart. And I've got a lot of respect for them for that.
Now, the secret world model's been brought up here, and the secret world model is kind of interesting to me because I've gone to it. The danger, might I add, people, of working with Gazimoff is he makes a comment and you go, I guess I will check it out. You check it out and you find yourself obsessed with the little things he says maybe you should look at it. This is a danger with working with him. He made mention one day, if you've never played The Secret World, to see how the quest lines are done, because we were talking about, advancement of character, etc. in a game, he made mention of The Secret World. It went on sale. I bought it. I am obsessed. Now, besides that, they have a rather interesting model, and I've just now, after playing for quite a while now, run into the first barrier to entry. And this is, I'm running around in a zone, I can't remember what zone it is, but I can't do some of the quests because they're only available if I've purchased that particular issue. And if I purchase the issue, yes, in Egypt, and if I purchase that issue, then I can do those quests. They're marked clearly, so I know that I have to buy certain things. But that's a buy a box, and if you want to, buy extra stuff inside it. You could buy, what is it? You could buy pets that can give you buffs and things like that. It's a whole different type of system. In Guild Wars 2, we've had this debate on MMOBuff before about whether or not Guild Wars 2 payment system, the shop stuff, is balanced or not, because some people think buying XP potions is unbalanced. Other people think there's nothing wrong with it. When you do a free-to-play model, there has to be some kind of balance. And if you're going to do free-to-play, if you're actually doing pay-to-win, please just be clear about that, developers. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it doesn't help that some people's opinion of what is pay-to-win is different to others. Like
I have a fairly strict interpretation of it as something pay to win. If you can buy an XP potion that helps you level faster, that's not pay to win because you're buying a temporary boost to rush through the journey. If you can pay,
Mispa completely disagrees with you. Just
I
saying.
know he does, and that's fantastic, but he's wrong.
He's wrong.
You heard it here,
we're all in
folks.
agreement. We're all in agreement on this, I think. Yeah, he's wrong.
If you can pay £50 for the Sword of Ultimate Wang, I mean, Sword of plus 10 or something.
No, let's just call it what it is.
The Sword of Saints Row.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. But if you get the idea, if you can play for a sort of noob slaying, for want of a better term, and run around slaying noobs all day because that's what you want to do, and it makes you pretty much impervious to any noob reprisals, then yeah, that is quite easily pay to win. And guess what? There are stacks of MMOs coming out of Asia and so on that are full of that, if that's your cup of tea.
It's not my cup of tea in the slightest. Absolutely not. And yes, Zexies, welcome. And yes, apparently we're all the sexy peoples on the internet. So congratulations, you guys. You're now sexy. Right. So some of the things we've covered so far, there are 3 things that needs to occur when you get to the sunset of a game if you're a developer. Either kill it in fire as quickly as you possibly can. Set yourself up into a free-to-play kind of model and just let it stay that way. Or you could do like a free-to-play model or even just cut it and just redo it like Final Fantasy has done. Reborn it. Yay. Yes,
What about
Aussie.
another option?
Bring it.
Of throwing it to the fan base and letting them do with it what they will and letting them support their own independent servers and deal with their own client problems and stop patching and just let it go. Why not let the fans control what you no longer want to support and produce if you're letting go of the IP?
Okay, so there's 2 things here. First of all, letting go of the IP as a developed studio, no! You may want to come back to that IP.
IPs have value.
Yes, long after a game dies. I mean, if EA can still make £2.50 a time off Tetris by selling it to people on their iPhones, and that's 20, 30 years old, then yeah, a 5-year-old MMO that's just been
Why do you make me feel old?
completely, it might have a resurgence, it might have a renaissance, you never know. It might have a nostalgic fan base who decide to come back to it if you decide to pick up the IP later on. You never know. There might Yeah, well, exactly.
Dungeon Keeper,
Sometimes it's a good conversion. Sometimes, like Dungeon Keeper, it's insulting to everyone's memory. But you never know. You might have the kind of imagine if
Gaz, the master of the witty understatement.
Imagine if someone like I don't know. Imagine if Blizzard bought the rights to Hellgate London and re-released it, and it suddenly became this most amazing IP. They bought Hellgate London. They pulled in some of the Diablo universe, set it in modern day or slightly futuristic, and it became, whoa, this is incredible. It could happen. It would be a fairly freakish universe. IPs have value.
I'm not sure I want to live in that universe.
I'm just terrified now. Thank you, Gazi. Nightmares.
The point is that if you chuck an IP over to the fans and say, do what you will, we will let you run amok with it, that can have so many negative results in terms of like your IP is suddenly being used for slightly dubious activities on a private server somewhere that happens to be open to the public. Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the issues that is German copyright law as well.
Yeah.
Alongside that as well.
Which one's the German copyright law?
Where if you make something, then you own the IP, regardless of if it's someone else's IP.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's why the Warhammer 40,000 fan film, Damnatus, eventually had to be cease and desisted when they realised it was a bunch of Germans making it, and if they'd released it, they would then own the 40k IP in Germany. Because of how German copyright law works.
Welcome to International Law. 101. Everyone, please grab your books and be aware that everything that you thought was reality isn't. Welcome to the freakish universe where Hellgate London is bought by Blizzard.
Speaking of,
yes,
what in my mind
German
is,
copyright law is a very, very strange thing.
Gotcha. What was that, Aussie?
speaking of something that to me is the lesser evil on a similar tangent, is a game that is no longer being updated and patched by the initial developer, that still has a strong mod community and fan base, that wishes to maintain the game without taking over the IP. And this could be seen in, like, not as much with MMOs specifically as other games that were online, or even solo games, solo game being like the Elder Scrolls, Morrowind, and online being like Diablo 2. They're past their prime. There is a new iteration within the IP already out, but there are still loyal fan bases supporting those older games.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a better alternative to sunsetting? And clearly, as I said, with MMOs, we haven't really seen, or at least I haven't seen this as much, having fan support rather than just chucking it.
Well, see, that's the thing. I remember distinctly when I got the news that City of Heroes / Villains was going to be axed. And basically, it hurt. It still hurts. In fact, whenever I have seen some of the people from NCSoft, I still look at them and go, why? Why did you do this to me? But, you know, they shut it down. And there was a huge, huge surge in the forums before everything was brought down of people going, let us band together. Let us do a Kickstarter campaign. Let us build together so that we can keep this thing alive.
Well, ironically, at Resd, me and Gazimoff were having this conversation about City of Heroes. And because I was like, well, NCSoft took it over at, like, just as one of the most groundbreaking pieces of content in MMO history was made with the Architect. And then like, a couple of years later, it's dead. And it's like, and, you know, from an entirely outsider's perspective, I'm like, that is like some serious mismanagement of a game. But obviously, having spoken to Gazimoff at Resd, I learnt a lot more about really what went on behind the scenes a bit more. And when a game's not making money, the game's not making money. What do you do?
That's the basic problem. If a game is not making money, and And this is why I'm going to kind of give a bit of a hat to Sony Online Entertainment in terms of the way they've managed to optimize their processes and their mechanisms in the way that no other studio has managed to do. And even they have had to turn around and say, well, we're closing Vanguard, we're closing Free Realms, we're closing Wizardry
We're selling
Online.
Pirates of the Sea.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, no, they're handing it back to the original developer, that one, I think.
Well, it's actually currently being rebuilt, to quote their website.
Yes.
Burning Sea,
So
Pirates of the Burning Sea. Sorry.
I think that even with their kind of operational efficiencies, that they've managed to, they can't keep everything running perpetually. And that's, you end up with their kind of setup where you've got some games probably subsidizing others. So I wouldn't be surprised if EverQuest 2 is subsidizing EverQuest 1 to a certain extent. And EverQuest Landmark is subsidizing EverQuest 1 as well. Because
part of me would be surprised if EverQuest 1 is just that cheap to run because it's so old. You could probably have that running on like one machine tucked in the corner somewhere. It wouldn't even need to be that powerful.
Quite possibly.
Because it is rather old now.
The key thing, though, is that you try and say, okay, how are we going to get people to subscribe? How are we going to, and that, because that's the overall goal. And they've turned around and said, well, we're going to have one subscription for access to all of our games, which is a fantastic move. And they're still going to have microtransactions, but they've brought in the Player Studio to try and get a little bit of player ownership. And that's a really nice kind of community feel thing. But
that was stolen straight from Valve with what they did with the Team Fortress stuff.
Definitely. But if you look at things like the way NCSoft is trying to do things, NCSoft still has a very much a siloed mentality with their studios. So it had Paragon Studios doing City of Villains, City of Heroes. It has Carbine Studios doing WildStar. It has ArenaNet doing Guild Wars 2. It has NCSoft itself doing Lineage. Those are all kind of broken up. There's no kind of parallelism. There's no kind of unified account system. There's no kind of unified support system. There's no kind of unified subscription system. All these things which you think, well, it would make sense to do. So you have your developers developing, and you have your back office people doing back office people and offering top-notch support as a result of it. That's the kind of thing. And so I really
plus doing things. Sorry.
So I really think that with Paragon Studios, it was a case of they've got their current game, which was losing subscribers and was on a downward trend and was not likely to start breaking into serious money anytime soon. And it was a case of running the numbers and saying, well, by the time it reaches this point, it's going to be a kind of drain on the resources. Running MMOs is a fairly tight ship anyway. And if you've got nothing else that's kind of in the oven ready to come out in, say, 3 or 5 years' time, like a new IP or a new iteration, and you've just got kind of more of the same expansions and stuff like that, then you kind of think, what's the point of keeping the studio going? This is one of the great things I admire about Blizzard, for all of their faults, the fact they've got 3 IPs and they are continually producing something new. So things like Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, all those kind of bits and pieces. They've got expansions, they've got new games, they've got you name it. So there's always something keeping things going there.
Well, see, in that particular case, what you're starting to talk about is more along the structure of company for an MMO. If you're doing an MMO and you're only doing one MMO and that's all you are doing, you know, all of your resource, your bread, your butter, your marketing, everything goes to that one thing. If you are, say, doing the model of Blizzard, you've got the entire quote-unquote Blizzard team doing that for all of the things, the PR departments, etc. And they all work hand in hand as far as we're aware because, you know, how often do you see someone from one particular development team sort of stepping into a panel for somebody else? I mean, there does seem to be a tight-knit community there. And it does seem like they kind of have water cooler talk. Hey, have you guys thought about doing this for Heroes of the Storm? Great, now we're going to go back and work on Hearthstone. We'll talk to you guys next week after we finish taking down that dragon in World of Warcraft. I mean, there seems to be some kind of built thing. But that separation or split that NCSoft has, it does mean that each individual development company for that MMO really needs to step up to the plate and deliver for them themselves. It's not like they're saying, hey, we're running a little slow on this development cycle. Could we steal a bit of people from the ArenaNet team? Oh, you guys need a little help with the living story? Let's just send Pappy over and help you guys write a little bit of lore or something like that. I mean, you don't have that kind of interchanging of resources. And I think that can actually cause MMOs to sunset faster than if they didn't.
Yes. I mean, the thing as well with Sony's model is, because of the way they do things, you also get a bit of an economy of scale saving. Because of the way everything runs together through one pipeline, it's like, when you buy stuff in bulk, you get each individual unit cheaper. Because they're buying it all for all of their stuff, they probably get a better rate from, for example, whichever ISP they're using, whichever server providers they're using, etc., etc. Whereas if each game is done individually, each having their own servers and their own data center and their own individual ISP pipe, the economies of scale don't add up quite so well either.
Well, see, this is an interesting thing's been brought up here in our chat by Drosted Blood, who says, it's a good thing that I love WildStar because I'm iffy about NC Soft. This is the thing. I mean, the games that, if you have a particular model like, say, NC Soft has, where they've had games that they've sunsetted, and it sort of has a knock-on effect to the other games, and people go, whoa, I'm not certain I want to take the time to buy a game or invest money in a shop or anything, because this game's not going to be around for very long, because that's the model they seem to share. That's what they sort of portray publicly. I mean, it has an effect.
I think that every developer has done things with either IPs or titles or games that we would, as gamers, not agree with, particularly if we're fans of the franchise. I have several axes to grind against Blizzard. I really came out the worst on the annual pass deal. I'm still a bit bitter about that. And I thought that Diablo 3, when it was released, was terrible. I think that they've managed to make huge strides with the
Reaper of Souls.
Reaper of Souls, the expansion, but I think that they should have done it right the first time. I think the same applies with SOE. I think that PlanetSide 2 was a low-performing lag fest when it first came out, and it's taken a fair amount of time for it to get there. Every single developer, EA, the first ending of Mass Effect 3, how much uproar did that get? I remember seeing my Twitter feed flooded with fans who were outraged at that ending.
I actually wasn't, to be frank. I really was okay with the ending.
It wasn't so much the content of the ending as ultimately, from all of this thing and all of this reactivity that's created, for some people, what is almost a completely different game in some respects. The ending is the same for everybody. Pick 3 buttons.
So
That's, I think, more the outrage.
Yeah. I think that what we need to do is, rather than say pick a publisher, is pick a game, follow a game, try and get involved with the game, help to make it the best game that you possibly can, even if you're part of a fan community. Get involved with the betas, provide strong feedback, let the team know when they're doing great things, but also call them out when they're not performing so well, when they produce stuff that's not up to scratch, and help them make the best game they can. But here is the important thing. If the game then comes out and it's absolutely fantastic, you've done your part in terms of helping to ensure that. If it comes out and it's complete dross, you've done your best. Your responsibility ends in terms of playing the game, measuring it, providing feedback, and that's it.
Well, see, that's the thing. We stress this a lot. People need to remember that literally only you can prevent sunsets. It's communities make or break games. They do. And it is up to communities to decide to either stand up or sit down. Put your money where your mouth is, as the saying
Absolutely.
is. But I think that even in that case, the one thing that I think is very hard for a lot of us gamers to do, especially opinionated gamers, is to let go of a game. If you really liked a game, I mean, let's just pretend I'm a crotchety old person who never wants to stop playing what I'm used to, etc. And my game gets sunset. Nothing else is ever going to compare. Nothing ever is going to be worth me looking at again. Everything else is hodgery-podgery. Go back, get off my porch. You know, that kind of mentality is actually very, very common. People being unwilling to accept new IPs or new stories or new MMOs and give them a chance. It's like, if you don't match what I already know, yeah. So, but yes.
People don't like change. Change is bad and evil.
The stream is offline, even though it's not offline.
Ooh.
Don't know.
Stream's died.
One moment. I don't know. I am now getting dropped frames, and I don't know why. Why forsooth you forsake us, Twitchies? Are we back? I think we're back. Offzilla.
Hello?
Hello, is there anybody out there? Anything goes wrong, blame it on the lop. Because that's what I am here for. Blame it on the lop. Yeah, yeah. Blame it on the...
We're back?
Right.
Apparently we're back.
Apparently we're
Yep.
back. It does look like we're
So,
back.
what Screenagers was put in chat, completely agree with him.
So Screen says, look, I'm going to wade in here on this. I have a number of years of testing stuff under my belt, and frankly, you can play test and provide quality feedback, but ultimately, if a design team does not take that feedback, you can only accept that. And that's true. But there's also that whole discussion that developers have of sometimes what players want is not what the game or the
Not what they
players need. I mean,
sometimes players want things that are bad for the game.
exactly, which is why in our show, when we discuss balance and everything, we specifically state that the best form of balance is imbalance. Accept that. But yes, I'm going to pull this particular portion of the show to a close because I know that Gazi needs to go run. We need to keep Gazi fed, otherwise the Chua gets grumpy, and we don't want a grumpy Chua. So I'm going to let you guys...
Explosions.
I'm going to let you guys leave on a thought. And what we'll do is, for people who want to have questions or anything else like that, after Gazimoff leaves, the three of us are going to pop back anyway and just continue to answer some questions or discuss some things that you guys might like to discuss. But yes, so in your own words, Gazi, sunsets, tell me, is all the things that we've discussed just covering or scratching the surface? I should say just scratching the surface.
I think they are all just scratching a surface. There are huge economic considerations that go on behind the scenes that are and those economic and business decisions are much, much stronger than any love or adoration that a collection of fans might have for a particular franchise. Sometimes the hard, cold choices need to be made.
Do you believe then, Alris, based on that we should, game developers should let people know what the choices or the metrics they're using to make these decisions, or should they just not keep anybody informed? Keep everyone in the dark?
Be honest as best they can, but ultimately, no matter what you do, no matter what evidence you provide, some people are never going to accept it. Regardless, they'll say, no, it should be kept going regardless. But there's always going to be some people that just won't listen to reason. But certainly be as honest as they can and just say, look, it's not viable.
Fair enough. And do you believe then, Aussie, that it is one of the hardest things a person or a game developer might have to do is say goodbye to something they've created?
Probably equally as hard as getting it going in the first place, in my perspective. Like, it's a long process to make a game. If you make a game and it fails before your production cycle has been paid for, and you're not even scratching what you need to make, and you're just going backwards profit-wise, that might sink an entire company, not just wreck that game. So I would say turning the lights off on a game, letting it sunset, is painful for both the company as well as the fans. Even if they're essentially chopping off an atrophied limb of their company, it's still painful to let it go. But making a great game that stays vibrant and healthy with a good community is the surest way to counter that. To stay profitable, you're going to need your community on your side as much as you can keep them on your side.
Right. And I, for myself, I think one of the hardest things as a player is to understand the decision process that's being made. I think there's no easy way to ease into telling players or even staff, we're done. I know, for example, the City of Villains was shocking. There was no warning. It was just, we're closing it in like 2 months. Sorry. And there was no warning at all. There was no even hints in the media that there was profit problems or anything else. So I think trying to keep the community involved and at least being aware that something might be coming, please do that in the future.
I think 2 months was more than Auto Assault got.
Oh, well, and some of the other games out there, yes, but yeah.
So, Auto Assault, I'm pretty sure was like, right, you've got about a week and a half. Have fun.
Yes. That's wonderful. But yes, I still take my hat off to Galaxies because as far as I'm concerned, that was probably one of the best sunsets I've seen. I love the fact that they specifically made it so that depending upon how certain metrics were on different servers, it depended whether the Republic or the Empire won on that server. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant way to send it off, other than just, we're shutting down the servers, you won't be able to log in.
I mean, if you're going to do it...
If you're going to do it, do it well. Go out with a bang.
It was one of the few good decisions they made with regards to Galaxies.
You and I will get into a debate about this after the show. How about that? But yes, a big, big, big thank you to every one of you who showed up and everyone who's given us their comments. When it comes down to making a decision to actually end a game, it's never going to be an easy one. But as Gazimoff has said, as Alris has said, and even as Occi have said, sometimes you have to cut off that dead limb in order to get the rest of the body healed. And unfortunately, as much as we may want people to just make the games we want, and that's fine, money is a factor. Marketing is a factor. There is a whole lot of factors that go into it besides just I write code and out pops pixels. But on that note, as a reminder for you all, tomorrow on the campfire, we are joined by Troy Aether Hewitt. Some of you may remember that name from somewhere. And all I am allowed to tell you, besides the fact that he is showing up, is that he's bringing a guest. And I can't tell you who, but it's a world premiere for this guest. Actually, I do know.
She doesn't know.
I do know, but I'm not allowed to tell you. But no, we're going to be introducing someone new. And that's going to be huge. So you're going to want to be here for the campfire on Tuesday. Wednesday, I am doing the show live because Dr. Marshmallows, we can't find enough Chua to sacrifice in order to summon the immortal Dr. Marshmallows. So it's just going to be me finishing off on the shaman thing because next week we start an entire new thing on Wednesday. And then Friday, I don't have Gazzy joining me on Cosmotronic. Sad face. But we will have team members here to answer questions as well as discuss news and, of course, dig into things. Now, we have a competition that is going to be hitting Facebook very, 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 very shortly. And this competition will give you a chance at a collector's edition of Reaper of Souls and one of 5 signed Reaper of Souls t-shirts signed by Alex Mabry, the lead game developer of Reaper of Souls. There will also probably be buttons and stickers and lanyards, but who knows? Swagzilla is crazy.
Fridge magnets.
Maybe even fridge magnets. Yeah, who knows? So,
Those
yes.
Come Again and fridge magnets were amazing.
They were absolutely amazing. In fact, they're decorating my refrigerator right now in a variety of manners that are wrong.
Would you like some extra swag to put in the pot?
You have something that we can throw into a pot? Uh-oh. Yes. Oh.
More swag.
Swagzilla gets excited by swag. Gets very, very excited because it means I get to give away more stuff. I love giving away things. I'm now like a little girl squeeing because Unky Gazzy has brought something for her. A PlanetSide 2 bag.
PlanetSide 2, messenger bag, flips, opens up, empty, but a bag complete with strap of shouldering.
Is that anything like the Sword of Wang from earlier, Gazimoff?
Let's not go there. Oh, and a couple of Battlefield 4 dog tags. 1, 2.
Ooh.
For you.
See, this is what people don't know. I get a lot of swag from the various game companies, but one of the biggest contributors of swag to me is Gazzy. He really is. I see him and he's like, here. And I go, what is this? He goes, it's just the extra swag. I'm like, wow, this is a lot of swag. But yes, I will put that into a completely different contest because I've got something special coming up for PlanetSide 2. Go figure.
Yeah, didn't I give you the huge stack of Secret World t-shirts?
Those have been slowly being given out periodically. As a reminder, folks, if you want a chance at one of Swagzilla's random loot packs, and my loot packs contain all kinds of weird things from game codes on down to t-shirts to lanyards to stickers to, yes, evening fridge magnets that you really shouldn't put up if you have children in your house. You want to make certain you get a question to us for one of our shows, and you do that specific one through voice@MMOBuff.TV. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google+, MMOBuff.TV, and Anouk. Don't forget about Anouk, folks. Anouk is something new. You're going to want to check it out, ANOOK.com. You can find us on there as anouk.com/company/MMOBuff. Now, it leaves me to thank all of these wonderful gentlemen for literally attending on what I would call is completely and utterly short notice, but also thank them for all of the work that they do behind the scenes that you guys don't see generally because mostly you see the glorious output. Within game development, you might be able to see people like Frosty, you might be able to see people like Brad McQuaid, but there are other people behind the scenes making certain that people like that have the ability to be in the limelight. So a huge thank you to you guys. And I'll give you a chance to say whatever type of farewell you'd wish to say. We'll take a brief break, let Gazimoff go get some food, and the rest of us are going to do a little bit of a post show. So, go ahead and say bye-bye, Alci.
Bye-bye.
Alris.
Goodbye.
Gazzy.
Arrivederci.
And for those who are constant watchers of
Cheers.
our show, you guys know how I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, toodle pip. Thanks for watching episode 26 of the MMO podcast, MMOs from Dawn to Dusk, where we discussed sunsetting of MMOs. Special thank you to Alris and to Occi, two behind-the-scenes members who stepped up to the plate to join us today. And also, if you are interested in watching a previous episode, click that bobbly head at the top. Please remember, if you like what you see, click like, share, subscribe, leave comments below. Tell us your thoughts. Let us know who you are. Speak with you soon. Toodle pip.